All right, I've got Manny Navarro on from The Athletic, covering college football in the state of Florida, Miami, recruiting, all of the above, ACC as well. So let's talk a little bit about the Hurricanes today. You're down there in South Florida. Miami fans certainly do not usually lack optimism at this time of the year, but are they? I'm trying to be nice with saying that. It's hope season, right, for
Yeah.
everybody. But there are bigger expectations for Miami this year, and are they bought in fully? Are they somewhat cautiously optimistic because of just the way that the last several seasons have gone, or how would you describe the mood right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly when you've gone through a 20-year span the way that Miami has, where you were once a great program and now you've just basically been a running joke that everybody likes to make fun of, right? Because Miami's, oh, look at these great recruiting classes, it doesn't work out. What's wrong with their quarterback? They just hired a new coach. It's a constant recycling of the same stuff, right? I think that cautious optimism is the right way to frame it. That said, and I know I've said this before, man, like over the years, I do feel like this is the best team Miami's had in this little era of struggle for them. These 2 decades of struggle. I think pound for pound, you look at the quarterback position, the running back position, the wide receiver room, what they've got on the offensive line, the way Mario Cristobal has built that, and then you look at the front seven on defense. I mean, it reminds me a lot of last year's Florida State team. And I know Florida State fans are probably going to roll their eyes and say there's no way Miami is that good, but it kind of feels that way. The secondary, I would say, is the one area that remains a question mark, and that's because they lost two of their best players there at safety and have to play some young guys. But I think this is, on paper, the best Miami team in the last 20 years.
So starting at the top, you mentioned a couple of them, but is it fair to say that Cam Ward and Damian Martinez are the best running back quarterback duo in the ACC and one of the better ones in the country?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, you got a guy who's got a bunch of career starts. I think 44 career starts between what he did at Incarnate Word, and that counts for something, right? You look at the guys who made the national championship game last year, played a whole bunch of football, both of the starting quarterbacks, and so to me, if you're Miami, you're excited about that. Damian Martinez brings you the kind of depth you needed at that running back position. He's 1,000-yard rusher, a legitimate dude back there, a physical guy. You don't have to worry about Mark Fletcher as much now coming off the injury in the bowl game. So to me, like just in the backfield alone, those two guys, you look at the rest of the league, quarterback, running back tandems. I guess you could look at Syracuse's and say that it's pretty good with LaQuint Allen and the transfer that came over from Ohio State at quarterback. Florida State, I think they have a nice collection of running backs. I like DJ Uyunglele. I think he's a top 5 quarterback in the league, but it's not as good as Miami's 1-2 punch in the backfield. Um, yeah, I don't know that there's necessarily anybody else. I mean, Kate Klubnik and Phil Maffa are very good, but I think you're right. I think Miami's Cam Ward and Damian Martinez, pound for pound, are 1 and 2.
You mentioned the secondary, and so maybe we'll just dive into that a little bit more. But I was going to ask you your biggest area for concern in 2024. What is it about that? Is it depth? Is it just inexperience? Is it just overall talent? Like, what are your thoughts on the secondary and why that? Not to give you an answer, but you already mentioned them, is an area of concern for 2024.
Yeah, I mean, it's just unproven. I think you got Daryl Porter Jr., who's a senior who's coming back, started 24 games in his career. He's like the one piece that's sort of been in the system for a while that has played a lot and been a key contributor for them back there. That's one guy. Then you bring in two transfers, Mish Powell, Downey Hill. Bish Powell's a guy who's kind of seen as a nickelback slash safety. I think he's going to play safety for Miami just because they're so sort of young at that position in particular. So he'll be back there. He's got 25 career starts, a guy that, was on a team that reached the national championship and was a key contributor. Deani Hills has 1 year of starting experience. He comes over from Marshall. He's not a Power 5 guy. He's got to prove it in my mind. He's probably going to be your nickel. And then you've got Damari Brown, who is super talented, a guy that I know everybody in the country wanted and was recruiting, which was, I think, he's pound for pound their best returning talent in the secondary. But he's been dealing with groin issues since last year, and so he's not 100% healthy. And it's one of those things that you don't know until they have surgery if they're really going to get completely over it. So those are your four main guys in terms of experience, and then everybody else is just young. I know they like Jadis Richard. I know they like Jaden Harris. Jadis Richards, a transfer from Vanderbilt, who got here a year ago. Jaden Harris is a guy who started the 2 games when Cam Kitchens was out last year, but that's it. Everybody else is a baby. Zaquan Patterson, the true freshman who was a top 100 recruit, is a really good player, but he's a freshman. So to me, you look at Miami's secondary pound for pound, and that's the biggest question mark on the team, no doubt.
When you look at this year's schedule and you see that, man, there's a lot of games. Not that Miami hasn't been prone to lose games they shouldn't in the past, but there's a lot of games that Miami should just win by default on the schedule. And then you probably look at a big four of Florida in the first game in the Swamp, which we'll talk about more later, Virginia Tech, Louisville, and Florida State. Outside of that, I mean, a game at Georgia Tech, who seems to be on the upswing. I mean, maybe there's some weird stuff that could pop up, but I mean, they really shouldn't lose a lot of games outside of those four. If they just go 2-2 in those games, maybe you could backdoor into a playoff. But 10 wins, is that enough, or do they really need to go 3-1 in that?
Yeah, I tend to think that unless you win the conference, you probably need 11 wins to make the playoff, and that's just because the SEC and the Big Ten are going to get all the credit, and people are, we saw it last year, right? Like it's just the way things are, and you don't know if somebody in the Big 12 is going to surprise, right? Like maybe you have two Big 12 teams go 12-0 or 11-1, and they're in a better position just because. And if they lose the conference title game, it doesn't hurt them as much. So I just think the ACC, unfortunately, there's no guarantee you're going to get a second team in. And I think the best way to do that is to win 11 games one way or the other. Obviously winning the conference will get you there. Going, 11-1 in the regular season, losing the conference championship game probably gets you there. So to me, 10 wins is ideally what you would say in this situation if all things were fair. But we know college football is not fair.
Yeah, certainly a year where Miami's going pretty all in too. They did a lot of work. They've had two really good recruiting classes, building a third really good recruiting class now, and then went pretty all in on the portal, getting the best quarterback and the best running back, and a year that it feels like they need to capitalize. And in most years, like you mentioned, the last 20 years for Miami, a 10-win season would be great, right? But then this year you're looking and you're like, man, you win 10 games, but you lose to Louisville and Florida State and miss Charlotte. Are you backdooring your way in? I mean, maybe. I mean, there's a chance, I guess, but man, it feels like it would leave some, unsatisfied with the opportunity that they had. Are they built like, say they are able to get into that playoff, whether it's from going 11-1 or winning in Charlotte? Are they? What's the depth like? Are they built to compete beyond the ACC this year?
Well, I think it obviously all depends on the pairings and who they end up, lining up with. If you've got to play Alabama, Jalen Milroe in round one, or Oregon in round one, assuming those teams don't win the conference, then that's probably not a very winnable game. But I think that they are built to go pretty deep, especially because of what they've got in terms of depth at the running back position. Mario Cristobal seems pretty confident that Mark Fletcher is going to be healthy and ready to go. I think he'll probably be held back a little bit in the early going until he's 100%. But between him and Damian Martinez, you've got a serious, two-headed backfield back there of high quality type guys. You've got three receivers with 800 yards coming off of 800-yard seasons, in that receiver room, and some other guys that they really, really like JoJo Trader, who's probably going to be one of the best freshmen in the country. They went out and they got a backup quarterback and Reese Poffenberger out of Albany that they think if push came to shove, he'd be okay. Emory Williams, who played last year as a true freshman because of the injuries to Tyler Van Dyke, beat Clemson at home last year, went on the road, and I thought played okay enough to keep Miami in the game at Florida State. So, they feel like they've got enough depth at certain positions on the offense that they could survive an injury or two and get to win a conference or maybe win a playoff game in advance. I don't know that they can be a Final Four team. I think that's probably expecting way too much. But could they get into the playoff and win a first round game? Sure. I think it just depends on the matchup. Whether or not they're a championship team or like a team like Washington that runs all the way to the final. I don't know that they're that yet. I wouldn't put that much faith in them right now because of some of the questions they have in the secondary. I think teams are going to be able to be able to hit some big plays on them in the secondary. But between defensive line depth, linebacker depth, some of the guys that they have, this is again, I think on paper as good a team as Miami's had in 20 years.
If you had one hot take or one bold prediction for Miami, it can be about Cam, Damian, the team, Mario in general. Let's keep it positive though, because I don't want anybody cussing both of us out. What's your hot take for the year for Miami?
Well, my hot take is they're going to get into the playoff. I think they are. I think whether that's winning 11 regular season games and losing in the conference championship to a Florida State or somebody else, I don't know. But I think this team on paper and based on the schedule in general, you mentioned getting Virginia Tech at home. I think Virginia Tech will be one of their toughest opponents. They get Florida State at home. Georgia Tech, it's got a really tough schedule. They do have to go on the road and play there, and they lost to them last year. But I thought Miami did a pretty good job against Georgia Tech last year and should have won that game. So on paper, I think this is a very, very much capable of going 11-1, stubbing your toe once, and maybe surviving that and getting to the conference championship. And I think I could see Miami going into the ACC title game as a favorite and losing because that's what they do. They always seem to blow it at the most inopportune time, but somehow still getting into the playoffs. So my bold prediction is Miami will make the playoff this year. I don't know if that means a first round bye or not, winning the conference, but I do think they will get it one way or the other.
Yeah, it's my opinion that you shouldn't be penalized for playing in a conference championship, right? If you go out there and lose like 45-3 to Florida State or Clemson or something like that, then maybe we have a conversation. But you lose a close game to another top 10 team, you shouldn't get penalized for qualifying for that championship. So if they were to go at 11-1 and lose, yeah, I think they should probably, anybody should still be in at that point. Manny, where can people follow you? Where can they find more of your work?
Yeah, you can read me at theathletic.com and you can follow me, follow my podcast, The Wide Right Pod. Got it both on YouTube and wherever you download your podcasts. I'll be working a lot more on the pod here as we near the start of camp and get things rolling here for the Hurricanes. And then you can also follow me on Twitter at Manny_Navarro.
Awesome. Thanks, man.